All right. Welcome to Facebook, folks. Still waiting on others' channels to connect. Wonderful. Looks like we're all on board. So here we go. Welcome to episode 3 of the Deep Dive series, looking at various tracks from the album, my album Currents, and exploring sort of what all the recorded parts may be, approaches to mixing, etc. So let's just dive on in. I thought this episode we would look at Giving You a Warning, which was the second single off the album, third track on the album in sequence. This one's a bit of a compressed, dense little pop pastiche with more than a little reference to the Cars production aesthetic in the late 70s, early 80s, late 70s classic Cars debut album in particular. Looking at that, I thought maybe I would look at how we did some of the guitar parts to start with. So just to get the song in your head, in case you're not familiar, here is a bit of Giving You a Warning in full.
Making bold predictions that accidentally come true. Lucky guesses won't impress my polyester princess. Lounging by the swimming pool, there right there the mountain comes to you. I'm giving you a warning. I'm giving you a warning. I'm giving you a warning. I'm coming for you.
All right. So we get a sense of the song, as I say, very Cars-ish, right? But let's go in a little deeper and see what we can look at. So again, in my recording process, I made a demo for Ben Whitman to play drums to. That demo was a click track, a pretty rudimentary electric guitar part that was reminiscent of what you're hearing, but not completely what you're hearing in the track. And I can go up and show you sort of what that was at one point. But eventually, once I got the drum tracks back from Ben, I realized my guitar parts were just not really cutting it. Even though it's very simple and basic, I am not really a guitar player, certainly not in the sort of pop rock mode. So I brought in a friend, Eric Garibaldi, who had done a lot of work subbing out for various guitar players in Birdsong at Morning videos. And we'd done some shows and gigs, and it'd been great to play with them. So I knew that Eric would be able to do what I couldn't do as a player. So the first thing we did was come in and I said, so Eric, can you replace my guitar parts? And I broke my guitar parts down maybe into certain sections. So the one that comes to mind is what we would hear theoretically at the outset of the introduction. And that would be, as far as I can assume, this part here. Let's see what we've got. I could be wrong. No, not wrong. That's it. So that's the opening guitar that you hear. Now, it sounds like, and it is essentially one part, but if we look here on the channels, we note that there's actually multiple guitar parts here. So Eric Rhythm 1, different mic amp settings. Let's go back. I'll mute one of those. And here's the other. Now you'll note that they are hard panned left and right. Even though they're labeled 414, a microphone, and 58, a different microphone, they are in fact two different performances. And part of what that's all about is just setting up channels and labeling them. Sometimes, however, I do record the same recording on an amp with two different microphones to then maybe decide later in a mix whether I'd like the qualities that a microphone gives the amp, one versus the other. The standard stock rock one is to put a 57, a Shure SM57 on a guitar amp. but my nomenclature here of 58 is not a typographical error. Rather, the 58 is the standard stock microphone that you see 99% of bands at your local bar singing into. It's the vocal mic version of the SM57. And even though it's a cheap and commonly found microphone, I don't have any 57s. I have a few 58s. So I use 58. What the hell? So anyway, a 414, different mic altogether, on the same mic. In this case, I decided to use the microphone from one amp, or from one recorded pass, and then when we did the doubling, use the different mic, just a slightly different timbral thing. Otherwise, what you're really hearing here is the same part played twice. This is very, very, very common practice, especially 1970s recording aesthetic and then beyond, is that with rhythm guitar parts especially, you play it and then you record a similar performance, similar sound, and then hard pan it so that you get two things creating a little sonic interest, but actually one set of musical information, basically. And it sounds like this. If you're listening with headphones, you can hear the differences in the performance. But if you're listening not particularly, certainly soloed, or not necessarily paying that deep an attention to it, I think what you end up with is something that feels a little more monophonic. In other words, you're getting the same musical information out of both speakers, slightly different timbres. So there's a sense of an immersion, but there's also a sense of one single sonic bit of information, as it were. And there's an argument, and Phil Spector had made it, and others have made it as well, that rock music sounds better in mono. Well, maybe it does. In some ways, it sounds better because it's coming at you. Boom, everything all at once, right? The other version of that is to say, yes, but stereo gives us the ability to pinpoint things in different parts of a soundstage and makes it more realistic in that sense. Or hyper-realistic, I might argue. But I think in some ways, by doing the stereo doubling and panning, you end up with the best of both worlds, which is that monophonic sense of things coming right at you, but a slightly different timbral quality in different speakers, for my money, feels more immersive, so that rather than being hit from only the front, you're kind of hit from multiple directions. Now, there are elements in the mix that are only in one channel or the other. For example, the drums are in stereo, and we'll look at those separately. So you'll hear that sense of a combination of the monophonic force versus the broader organic, I'm in a room with musicians thing. Okay, so anyway, that's the basic doubling that Eric's doing, at least on the introduction, but it doesn't stop there. As the song develops, now we're hearing Eric do the same part, but with definitely a different timbre in his amp. That's a little more distorted, a little more overdriven amp sound. Let me go back here so I can see where these parts are coming in. There's a lot of Alan up there. Okay, here we go. There we go. Eric. Lots of Eric. Yes. So the first rhythm guitar part that we hear is here. Now you'll hear the doubling distorted come in just a second. Watch it happen in the lower part of the screen. So now those parts are happening. It's the same part with two different timbres, doubled and panned. So you're getting that weird sense of it's all the same and yet it's all a little different. Okay. Now there's another little fun thing that happens. come down here. Let me get rid of these things for now. What I refer to as, and you'll know why, I want to hold your hand. So there's that, and it feels like it's not all coming through. But anyway, I know why. La la. Different mics going to different things. Here we are, the real I want to hold your hand. And again, sorry for the crackle that happens with my computer crunching. So, oh yeah, I'll tell you something, right? And again, this is two different microphone signals. And those signals are balanced separately and panned separately. So the same part in stereo, doubled, and with two different sound sources on the amp. So we're getting a lot of different sound here. It comes back around. A little bit of noise too. I dealt with that a different way in the mix. Okay. Now, if we keep looking at all these guitars, you may notice what's labeled rhythm 3 here. And if we look at, we can almost predict, you see there's little gaps in this. This will be a different part. So let me get rid of all the I want to hold your hands. We no longer wish to hold your hands. And instead, let's come up to this rhythm guitar 3 part. That's all I ended up using for a while. So you get the more of a power drive, but not the chunt, 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 rather jump, 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 jump. That's actually a reinforcement of yet another guitar part. Look at all the guitars that are in this thing. It's crazy. What I've labeled Eric Direct 1 and 2. That's because this part that he's playing right now is much closer to the part I put down when I put the demo together for Ben to play to. So he's really just recreating and I put it through a little bit of a room. It's really back in the mix. It's not loud compared to the other guitars that you might be hearing, but it's there. And then, of course, as we bring in parts, we start to hear a guitar army coming in. Okay, so that's a lot of Eric. He's not doing a whole lot of different things, but it creates a thickness of sound. And in the end, for a lot of this track, the expansion and contraction of the arrangement has to do with how much Eric are we hearing at any given time. Okay, and since I do have an ego, I did allow myself to play a little bit on this song. Where did I do that? Well, in these acoustic guitars. And the acoustic guitars are actually slightly different. So there's this version of the acoustic guitar, and this is very close to what I had been doing on the demo. Doesn't really add all that much, but it's in there. You do hear this during the verse, right where I stopped the play button. The strum is more obvious during the sung verse in the mix. Okay, and then to sort of emphasize that, I brought up what I'm calling the Martin strum. So now we'll hear more of a continual strum. And you hear it's a much brighter tone. So it cuts through the mix more. You may be looking at, what's that? Well, that's what I'm labeling Martin Power. So again, it's on a Martin acoustic guitar. Notice it's 1 and 2. Once again, these are going to be panned left and right. And it's just for that big ka-cha-jong, cha-cha-jong power chord moment. So there's actually a lot of acoustic guitars going on. Think Phil Spector's production on George Harrison's All Things Must Pass album. My Sweet Ward in particular will have this kind of acoustic guitar layering going on. I'll solo up my Martin power chords.
Lounging by the swimming pool.
Oh yes, much power. It's kind of silly, isn't it? All right. Now, if we were to go in and mute a few things, we can start to hear how all of this sounds with just let's keep the bass and the drums out of this for a while, and then we'll listen to how the vocal is starting to fit into this scenario. Or actually, no. Let's. There's a lot of canceling to get rid of vocals. Anyway, we'll just listen to the vocals because there they are. But here's the guitars anyway with vocal.
For crying out loud, won't you turn down that radio? I'm drowning in the sound of things that I don't need to know. I'm giving you a warning. I'm giving you a warning. I'm giving you a warning. Get set, go. Making bold predictions that accidentally come true. The lucky guesses won't impress my...
Okay, so it's created a little bit of an orchestra, and it certainly would help if I brought the bass in to help fill in what's missing in the lower register. So Greg Porter, it's time to hear what you're adding to this as well. He's muted somewhere. I know, let me kill all this. Boom, boom. Go in and bring up the bass. It's possible he's not playing at that moment. Hard to find all these things. Look at all these guitars. It's crazy. Somewhere in there's a bass. Ah, there it is. And you can see it's labeled amp and DI. So we're taking a direct signal, the DI, direct injection, as it were, from Greg's bass guitar. But we're also putting a microphone on the amplifier, and I'm balancing between the two. The DI gives us a little more presence. The amp gives a little more roundness to the sound. And it's a combination of both. Okay. So let's go back in and see what we've got here. Now I'm seeing things are muted that shouldn't be muted, so somebody is not playing ball game, playing ball here, too many tracks. Okay. Kill that solos.
There, right there, the mountain comes to you.
Okay. So we have inadvertently muted things that we want.
Oh, I'm giving you a warning. I'm giving you a warning. I'm giving you a warning. I'm coming for you.
Okay, so that's the full band back in. Bass drums, pretty much standard stock. I think the only thing that's happening of any weird interest might be in the drums is this effect here, Doppler. is only affecting the snare drum. It's so minimal, you can barely hear it. What I was originally going for is on those Cars records, there's a Syndrum, electronic drum, that's either substituting for the snare drum or sometimes doubling the snare drum on Cars tracks, kind of going pew, pew. And so I thought maybe that's what I needed to do to the snare drum here. I did that, and then I didn't really like it. So I said, maybe I'll bring it down in the mix. Maybe I'll bring it out of the mix. I found that every time I brought it out of the mix, I didn't like the snare as much. And so the Doppler effect is in the mix. It's just not in the mix so loudly that you can really hear it. There's the snare without it, with. I hear it, but probably no one else does. So much. So be it. Okay, so that's the drum bit going on. Now. Oh, and also Eric played a phenomenally cool pop guitar solo, the kind of thing that you want where there's a recognizable, singable melody. And in this case, just as we've been taking all of his guitar parts, doubling them left and right, we did the same on the solo. The difference here is that they're not hard panned left and right as we had done the rhythm parts, but they're much closer to center. So now it choruses. You hear the phase relations changing constantly between those two sounds. But that's a doubled guitar solo. Now, when people double, sometimes the practice is to play something once and then listen back to what was played and try to play it exactly the same. When I double vocals, I don't do that. I didn't do that for this guitar stuff either. So what you're hearing are two different takes of Eric playing the solo. So as he played those takes, he did not hear other versions of the solo. Rather, he just played two versions that were, because he had pre-composed the solo, it's not improvised as it were, he was able to say, okay, let's do it exactly. And I just took two takes that I thought were really good, panned them, there we are, the guitar solo. All right, now I do want to get deeper into what's happening with all the vocal treatment, because there's quite a lot going on. If we look here at the numbers of tracks devoted to vocals, there's quite a bit. So there's what I call the dry verse vocal. That's what you hear at the opening of the song. Not so much processing, definitely more compressed, drier. Then we have what I call voice full. That's where I'm singing more loudly. It's treated differently. And then the full compression. Now, I may have alluded to this in earlier deep dives, but let's go a little deeper into this one since we're here. So what this is actually a complete copy. The full compression is a copy of the full track. So you can see they look exactly the same. However, if we go into this mode and look at what's happening with the compression track, I've taken out. This should be theoretically a straight line across here, meaning there's no equalization at all. But in this case, I've taken out everything that I can below a certain point and above a certain point, and instead boosted a very narrow band of the frequency spectrum on my vocal. Then it's being sent to a really intense compression insert program to get all the dynamic completely squashed. So there's no variation. It's really constantly present. Well, what does it sound like? It sounds horrible if you can hear it at all. I'm not sure you can. Let me make sure I'm at a point in the vocal. See, I wasn't. Let's get to here. It sounds almost like bad headphone leakage. It's that thin thing, but what it is it's emphasizing some of this consonant, lip sound, etc., without the sibilant above and without any of the tone below. If you add that to my voice, so let's hear what I've got, and you'll hear the processing probably on the full voice in terms of reverb, etc. But listen to the vocal without the compression added.
Climb down, Desdemona.
And with that same phrase, but now with that added little band of frequency boost and compression.
Climb down, Desdemona.
I'll play it again and mute it in and out so you hear it coming back in and out.
I'm down, Desdemona. I ain't gonna seal your fate. I'm just trying to warn you, but the hour.
At the end, you could hear it in there, but the hour. And the reason for that is simply to fight all of that guitar orchestra. I want to make sure my vocal is clear. And one way to do that is to find the frequency spectrum that's sort of devoted to the voice itself in terms of clarity, diction, etc., and blend that into the more rounded vocal singing tone. So that's what we get there. We can compare what I'm calling the dry voice with the process voice.
Crying out loud. Won't you turn down that radio? I'm drowning in the sound
A different kind of compression on this.
of things that
This compressor is hitting all of what I'm singing, not just a tiny frequency spectrum.
I don't need to know. I'm giving you a warning.
Yeah, okay. Basically lead vocal stuff, etc. Then there's what I'm calling some of the doubles and highs and bottoms. And this is for the sections where the vocals sing with the lead vocal.
Get set, go!
Yeah, that's really important, right? Well, it sort of is in the context of the song.
Get set, go!
So it gives multiple voices. They're not particularly in tune or finessed or polished, but they are in harmony. So it does flow to the rest of the guitar parts and certainly is meant to be heard in tandem with the lead vocal. So here all together.
Giving you a warning. Get set, go!
There we go. Okay. Now that's some set of harmonic stuff, but you'll see, what is all this? There's all this space, and you see, oh, he's got harmony vocals. Now this is something I call, I believe, if I cancel this set of solos and instead solo up what's called the harmony vocal pad, we'll be able to explore, yes, this in a little more detail. This is what's happening at a couple of different points in the song where I'm building harmonic blocks. So at the end of the bridge, you'll hear something like this.
Too late.
Okay, it's sort of the Andrews Sisters, right? A little bit old school harmonic layering. Now what it is, of course, we can pull this down, is we're building from a lower note, sustaining that, adding the third above it, sustaining that, etc. So here's the build. Here's that first part, the low part.
Too late.
Now you may notice I soloed up two voices. So this is me singing the same part twice, just as we were doing the electric guitar doubles, only in this case, they're not hard panned. They're actually panned pretty closely together, as if there were two human beings in one location singing this part. And you can compare that in your headphones when I add the next part, which will show up at a slightly different part in your stereo mix.
Too late.
Now you hear where we're going. Let's add a third above that. See where this comes in.
Too late.
And lastly, the full choir, as it were.
too late.
Yeah, okay, that's kind of silliness, but it's a moment. For me, it's even more effective on the repeat choruses. And you can see here from the blocks that we start out building one set of harmonies, and then a second part is added. And let's just hear what it sounds like as it is with all these parts up, so we can hear them together. And you'll hear where the top part is added to thicken this chord. Fun. Okay, and again, the crackle is just my computer trying really hard to stream and crunch all this audio at the same time. I apologize for that. So yeah, you hear that there's a slight build in that chord, and I think in some ways it's nice to hear it in tandem with the lead vocal, so you hear how it's supposed to work all together. So let's try that.
Giving you a warning. I'm giving you a warning. Ooh, I'm giving you a warning. I'm giving you a warning. I'm giving you a warning from my heart.
Now you may notice the "from my heart" sounded a little thin. That's because I'm still muting these other doubles of the vocal where I add the group saying, doubling with me of my heart.
From my heart, from my heart, from my heart.
Yeah, so the Allen Tabernacle Choir. That's a lot of vocal work. If you look at all the tracks devoted to harmony vocals that don't really do much very often, they're often just not there. They just come and go, little ear candy bits. So this is in some ways an arranging question. How to create interest in a pop song where something kind of interesting new needs to happen every 3, 4, 5 seconds. Well, for me, I've done a lot of guitar orchestration, so you don't really hear a lot of this vocal stuff until we get towards the end of the song. Then it becomes more of a vocal extravaganza, right? Let's just go ahead and unsolo everything. And let's see if we can play this track. Yeah. All right. So moving back, I don't know, let's say halfway through.
I'm just trying to warn you, but the hour's getting late.
Okay. One thing I forgot to maybe bring out to your attention is one of the highlights of the track for me, which is, where are we here? My cowbell solo, which deserves to get soloed, I think. Somewhere in here there's a cowbell. I saw it. There it is. Yes, kids, it's fun to make records because at some point you can make your cowbell jokes. I've got a fever. Okay. In a way, the cowbell, it's a standard trope. There's a reason that that's a joke in that famous sketch. It's because a lot of pop rock records employ the cowbell, and sometimes they use it for exactly what I'm using it for, just sort of give it a little more drive and propulsion. If you're thinking about stuff like We're an American Band, it's clanking the whole time. It's a little bit more of a groove in the Stones' Honky Tonk Woman. In my case, it's more like We're an American Band. It just hits the beats. But I saved the entrance of the cowbell to just before the bridge, or at the bridge, actually. So it demarcates musically another moment. No cowbell, as you can see here. Cowbell coming in. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Climb down Desdemona high.
There it is, lovely.
I'm just
Now you may not hear the cowbell make its entrance, but for me, I didn't put the cowbell in until right towards the end when I realized, nope, I need something at that moment in the bridge. Things are happening, there's some harmony vocals, but it's not quite enough. And the cowbell made the difference. So that's the entirety of the track. There's one more thing I do want to show you, however, and that is that in addition to all this layering and all this stuff going into the mix of a 3-minute pop song, I realized that the whole recording had been made at the wrong tempo. Devastating to realize this. Well, there's a nice technology that we can call up to help us fix those little oversights in our musical, and that is you can do time compression. Let's activate this. Okay. So time compression, meaning I could take a recording that was at one tempo, which I deemed to be too slow, and make it faster. Now, in the tape days, you could certainly do that, but when you did that, you also raised the pitch. The faster you made the playback, the higher the pitch was raised. That's how you get the chipmunks. In this digital version, you can not pitch correct, not change the pitch, but change the tempo. This is common practice in a lot of dance music and electronic DJs. Everybody that's 12 years old can do it on their phone at this point. But I did it to try to correct what should have been a performance, my bad conception as producer, what's the tempo supposed to be. So here's, just because of my technology limitations, here is the instrumental version of the track as we recorded it. So this is at the tempo that we've been listening to what I've been soloing up today. I mean, it's okay. It feels okay, which is why we didn't notice it for a long time, that it seemed to drag when it should be pushing. I feel it here in particular. Instead, I made the whole thing a little faster. So here it is with the time compression.
crying out loud. Won't you turn down that radio?
There we go.
I'm drowning in the sound of things that I don't need to know. I'm giving you a warning.
Now, it may not seem perceptibly that much faster, and it's not a huge shift in time, but this is in red here, is the original tempo. This track above is the revised tempo. And how do we know we've made any change? Well, look at how things begin to drift apart. And the bottom one, the one in red, you see it's this, only it's here. That's how much time has been added, or actually I should say time has been subtracted by making it faster. The last chord of the hit of the band is here in the original. The last chord of the hit of the band happens here, which is, I think I've lost about a second and some increments, maybe a second and a half. Again, not radical, but perceptible. And then we can hear that as we were hearing it by soloing up both tracks. Let's hear them begin at roughly the same point and gradually separate.
For crying out loud, won't you turn down that radio? I'm drowning in the sound I don't need to know. I'm giving you a warning. I'm giving you a warning. I'm giving you a warning. Get set, go.
You start to hear how it has actually, we're about not even a third of the way into the song, and we have already separated very distinctly in terms of the time and beats. Now, it's a lovely technology that we have to help salvage a mistake, but my advice to you out there is try to avoid making that mistake, because it adds an additional step to everything you do. If you're working on a mix and you want to check it out, now you've got to do that rough mix and time compress it to see, right? So it's get it right the first time if you can. If, on the other hand, you found you can't, there is always a solution to most problems. I remember there was a Paul Simon interview where he said, in the studio, there is always a solution to every problem, unlike real life. And I found that to be true as well. All right, so that's basically it. That's giving you a warning. Guitars, vocal stacks, doublings like crazy, all in a 3+ minutes pop song. And I appreciate that you took the time to check it out. Check out the other deep dives, and we'll look forward to seeing you all next time around. Thanks again. See you all next time. Bye.